One of the ways that I like to look at philosophy is I like to look at philosophy as a discipline that creates tools for us to use in our lives. These tools are conceptual, sure, they're theoretical, they're abstract, but the cool thing is we can use them, we can apply them to real things, to the stuff of our lives. We can actually take them out into the world with us and apply them. As such, epistemology, just like any other branch of philosophy, certainly does involve learning and understanding the content of those theories, those concepts, maybe memorizing the people that are associated with different theories in the field. But it's equally important, I think, to understand that these theories of knowledge that epistemologists have put forth are themselves tools that are meant to be tested out. And so in this short talk on theories of knowledge, rather than exploring the content of individual theories, what I want to focus on instead is the way in which such a theory would actually function, the way that theories of knowledge work, what goes into them, what are they used for, what kind of job are they supposed to do, so to speak. And in later talks, I'll go into more detail about the content of individual examples of these theories. But the reason that I'm taking this approach is because I really want to emphasize the active quality of philosophical work, rather than presenting it as just rote memorization and recitation of past ideas. It's not an 8th grade test on the American Revolution, where we're just memorizing people and places and things like that. It's something we're supposed to be able to use, right? That's where the meaning of philosophy comes in. That's where the value comes in, I think. So I really want to highlight that epistemology, just like any other branch of philosophy, is supposed to be very much an active process, not just a passive means by which we accept things uncritically and unquestioningly. That would kind of defeat the whole purpose of the discipline. So we'll be focusing here on what goes into theories of knowledge, what such a theory is supposed to accomplish conceptually and functionally, and that, I think, will be a nice foundation for us for going forward. Theories of knowledge are supposed to do two things. One is to give an account of knowledge, and the other is to give a defense of that account. An account of knowledge tells us what must be in place in order for me to say that I know something. Having such an account is a bit like having a box from a puzzle that you're working on and periodically referring to the picture on the box to make sure you're putting things in the right place. It's a reference point. It's something you can measure what you think might be true against what you hold to be necessary for saying that you know it to be true. Of course, anyone can give an account of knowledge. We could say anything. So suppose I said that knowledge is whatever is in my mind. Well, that doesn't sound like a very good account of knowledge. If knowledge is whatever is in my mind, and what is in my mind at the present moment is a thought like, the earth is definitely flat. It's definitely not round. Then you would have to conclude that I know the earth is flat. I know the earth is flat? That's kind of weird because it isn't flat. So that kind of deflates the meaning and the value of the word knowledge, kind of. So that's not a very good account of knowledge. Just thinking through this with my own innate, certainly not infallible capacity for reason, I'd find it hard to accept such an account. So an epistemologist not only has to come up with an account of what knowledge is, they also have to come up with an argument to support that account. They have to come up with a defense of why someone else should accept it. And there have been many, many accounts of knowledge that epistemologists have come up with over the years, and there's almost certainly some new ones that we haven't even thought of yet. The field of epistemology is expanding rather than contracting, at least historically that's been the case. Even so, there is at least one thing upon which almost every epistemologist could agree, and that is that knowledge, whatever it is not just one thing. there's probably at least a few distinct components that go into whatever we might want to say is knowledge. And so an account of knowledge and a defense of that account is going to have to say something about each of those components. So if I'm an epistemologist and I have a thought in my head that I want to call knowledge, then there's a few things that I'll need to account for. My account of knowledge is going to have to say something about the content of that thought, such as, is the thought true? My attitude towards that thought, such as, do I believe it? And the reason or reasons that I have for holding such an attitude. In other words, am I justified in believing that it's true? So whenever I believe some proposition, and that proposition is true, and I am justified in believing that the proposition is true, then I have knowledge. Truth, belief, and justification. Taken together, these three elements give us a preliminary answer to the question of what knowledge is. It's something for epistemologists to at least get their hands on. It's something they can start with to continue their work. It's a starting point for epistemology as a field in philosophy. But it's just that, the starting point. It's only the beginning. If epistemology simply stopped there wouldn't be so many different accounts of knowledge. There wouldn't be so many theories related to each of these three components, truth, belief, and justification. That's why this preliminary definition, which we'll be exploring in more detail in the next talk, is only the beginning for an epistemologist who's trying to come up with an answer to something like the following question. Why should my possession of a given thought be taken to mean that I know something? So this preliminary definition of knowledge is kind of like the drum track in a recorded piece of music. Usually that's what gets laid down first, and then other instruments, vocals, and so on get added on top. Or we could liken this preliminary definition of knowledge to the blank canvas or the block of marble that a painter or sculptor might start with to build their work of art upon. It's really important, I think, to have a place to start with whatever kind of work you're about to engage in. Sure, we have to start somewhere. And even if we can't all agree on where we should go from there, it seems to make sense that there should be some point on which we can all agree, okay, this is where we're starting from. Everybody ready? All right, let's go. That seems to make sense. It seems like a good thing to have. But even so, at this point, I think another question is likely to arise. At least I hope it would. If we're thinking like philosophers, we're always going to be asking more and more questions. And the questions coming up for me right now is, why should we take this preliminary definition of knowledge to be our starting definition in the first place? What's so great about it anyway? I think it's a valid question. Perhaps one that without which the rest of these talks would be kind of meaningless. So maybe that's something that we do need to take a closer look at. After all, to return to our analogy of the drum track and the block of marble, the blank canvas, even before you have that drum track, that canvas, that block of marble, you're probably going to want to make sure that the drum track is, really good, really solid drum track to build upon. You're going to want to make sure that there's no rips in the canvas before you start painting it. You're going to want to make sure there's no blemishes or marks on the marble that's going to mess up your carving when you start working on it. So perhaps we need to do the same thing with our preliminary definition of knowledge. Why should we take this to be a good starting point for epistemology? And that's what we'll be looking at in the next talk.